Now let's get even more selective. Instead of altering similar colors throughout an image, suppose we want to limit our adjustments to specific locations in the image. Well, that's easy to do with the adjustment brush. That tool is located up here in the toolbar. We'll click that, and notice along the right we have a completely new set of options. Now exposure, brightness, contrast, saturation, etc., those should look familiar. They come from the basic panel, but here's the difference. These adjustments will be limited to the exact locations that we specify. And how do we determine those locations? Simply by painting. Let's get started by adjusting one of these parameters. I'm going to start with brightness. I'll drag this slider to the left. Notice the image has not changed. I have not told Camera Raw where to apply this brightness value of -74. As I move the mouse over the image, notice that I've got a crosshair, which is going to be very important in a moment, and I've got two circles. The innermost circle is our brush size. That's the diameter that we'll be painting with. The outer circle indicates our feathering. Now we can change size and feathering very easily. By moving down here, I can drag the size slider to the right to get a larger brush. I'll keep this back where it was at 6. That'll be pretty good for this. Feathering, I'm going to set that all the way to the right at 100. We want a nice soft edge brush here. And for our purposes, we are going to leave flow and density both set to their maximum values of 100. What I would like to do is take down the brightness of this tree. So I'm simply going to click and drag to paint. Now, two things should be very obvious. One, I've set a value that's much too strong. Two, I am spilling over here into the sky. Let's tackle that first issue. Here's the beauty of the adjustment brush. At any point after I have painted, I can readjust the settings. So I can back off this brightness slider here, give us something that's much more believable. And even though brightness was the only parameter that I adjusted, I could move the saturation slider, take color out of that, boost it to add more saturation. Let's set that back to 0. And this is the great thing about the adjustment brush. You paint, and then once you see visually what's happening, you can tweak any of these sliders to taste. Now let's take a look at what we can do about that spillover. I'm going to turn on this Show Mask checkbox, and now you will see a white overlay. This shows where I painted. That includes the diameter of the brush and the feathering. So you can see I've spilled out onto the edge of the roof, I've spilled out over into the sky. In short, I was very sloppy when I was painting. Let's turn off Show Mask for a moment. We're going to turn on the Auto Mask feature, and we're going to paint that area again. Before we do that, we want to get rid of the painting that we just did, and notice that we have this little bullseye icon here over the image. That's called a pin. The pin will be placed at the location at which you start painting, and a pin simply tells you that that adjustment brush is active. And because Camera Raw allows for multiple and separate brush adjustments, you can end up with multiple pins on a single image. We're going to delete the pin by simply pressing the delete key on the keyboard. Now I'm going to paint, and I'll do it just as sloppily as I did the first time. Notice that I have reduced the brightness setting, so I'm getting a much more realistic result right off the bat. Now that I've painted, let's go in and turn on the Show Mask preview. Notice now how my mask has been automatically limited. It didn't spill over into the edge of the buildings. It didn't spill over into the sky. When you turn on Auto Mask, that tells Camera Raw to limit your painting. And what does it limit it to? Well, I talked about that crosshair earlier. With Auto Mask turned on, Camera Raw looks at the colors that fall directly underneath your crosshair. No matter the size of your brush, no matter the size of your feathering, your adjustments will be limited to colors and tones that match what is directly underneath your crosshair. So as I was painting in here, I can be as sloppy as I want. I just make sure that the crosshair does not spill off of this foliage, and you won't have any spillover into these neighboring colors and tones. A very, very useful tool to use when you need to be really precise about your selections. I'm going to turn off Show Mask and Auto Mask. Those of you paying very close attention to the adjustment brush panel may notice a new option that we did not see in the basic panel. That's this color option here, so I'm going to quickly show you what that's about. This option lets us paint with a color, changing color in an image, but unlike with the hue slider, we can limit that color change specifically to where we paint. Now before we get started with this, I need to direct your attention to this pin up in the top of the tree. Notice that it has a black circle in it. That means it is active. Any change that we make to any of those adjustment brush settings will apply to that adjustment, and we don't want to do that, so I'm going to hit New. I'm going to make a brand new adjustment brush setting. Here I'm going to take brightness and set that to 0. I don't want to change the brightness. What I do want to change is color. So I'm going to click in this color swatch box, and I'm going to choose something in the orange range over here. Simply by clicking, I've got a brand new color. I hit OK. Now what I'd like to do is change the color of this window molding. Notice now the size of my brush relative to the window molding. What will happen if I paint like this? Yes, my color change will spill over onto the side of the building.